Great to see you again. Today we're going to dive into the world of configuration management. This is a critical aspect of technology development, deployment, and management, and I particularly have a love-hate relationship with this because once you get this right, it will make a lot of your problems go away, but sometimes getting there. Now let's move on and talk about our objectives. Our first objective for this course is to recognize the key terms and aspects of configuration management and how it benefits the organization. Objective number 2, recall the configuration management practices and activities and gain my tips and tricks on how to adopt these in your organization today. And finally, identify key. All right, let's jump in and talk about Module 1, Configuration Management Overview. This will be very quick. We're going to go into a lot more details a little bit later on. But this is how I like to explain a configuration model or configuration management. Think about Google Earth. When you go to Google Earth, you go to the globe. So some benefits of good configuration management. Of course, if we look at the things that we talked about in time, very, very fast module. We're going to jump deep coming up next. Let's see what COBIT says about managed configuration. In the COBIT model, there are 40 governance and management objectives. You can find out more information on these in other courses that we have on COBIT, but we're going to focus here on BAI10 managed configuration. Now, within the COBIT framework, as we mentioned, we have practices. Under BAI10, we have 5 practices. These are what we call management practices. Think about those as control objectives for the process. Under BAI 10.1, establish and maintain a configuration model. Let's jump into the Governance and Management Objectives Guide for COBIT 2019. As you'll see here, this is a download you can get out on the ISACA site. In this guide, it has all of the 40 governance and management objectives and gives more information that you might need for each one of those. And let's take a look at the overall, first the core model. You might recall, it'll give you a little bit more information on how to interpret each one of these because sometimes it can be kind of tough understanding what they're looking for in the COBIT framework. Now let's start first with one of my favorites. Establish and maintain a configuration model. Because configuration models help us to look one of the levels or one of the altitudes of your configuration model. Now, all this information is great, but shouldn't we have a way of knowing more about each one of these configuration items? Absolutely. So let's take this item right here that sits in my network. I don't know what that item is, but I want to find out more information about it. What I can now do is expand that configuration item into what's called a configuration record. The reason I didn't go through this in detail is because I've got a download of these for you. Now, most of the modern service management tools like review and formally agree on changes to configuration baselines. Some ways we might be able to do this, really love this. Here's my advice. Number 1, you have to have configuration item ownership. Create clear roles and responsibilities, specific accountability plans, and of course, minimize your downtime. So I told you we'd talk about a few scenarios on some of the things you could do to help you make sure that you have accurate and up-to-date information out there. So I want to tell you my story. Now, how do we keep these configuration items updated? Well, in my organization, ladies and gentlemen, you went through a deep dive of COBIT, especially the practices. Hopefully the advice and suggestions I offered are helpful for you. Stay tuned for Module 4. It actually goes very deep into the relationships between configuration management and other processes because I feel that it's a huge success factor in how you can be successful in this process. Objectives, and you can't argue this process is related to many other processes. Now, we'll take a look at this idea of configuration management right here. Where is this related to other processes? Well, I've highlighted a few areas here that I think are important aligned with your business objectives. Some of them that I think are really important I've highlighted right here. Now, you may have something different in your organization, but this is based on my experience with configuration management. So we'll only cover these 6 processes in this course. Now, we'll break each one of them down, and I want to tell you a little bit about why each one. I know I've already given you a lot of practical advice, especially during Module 3 when we talked through the COBIT practice deep dive. But I wanted to consolidate some of my biggest tips that I want you to remember from a configuration standpoint. Again, we'll talk about this again a little bit later in Module number 7, but I want to give you this practical advice, and I love to give my top 10 tips. Number 1, make no mistake, configuration management is part, but it's important to understand that there's a difference between outcome and output measurements. Let's jump into these a little bit more. Well, first, I'd love to share this cartoon with you. If you take a look at, wow, we've covered a lot of information so far in this course, but let me summarize this with some of my tips, tricks, and let's go to a closing next. First off on my tips and tricks, number 1, don't approach configuration management as a weekend project. As you've seen, this is not something that you can start on Friday. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and patience on this course. I know we dove deep into some areas, but hopefully you got a good overview of configuration management. Keep an eye out for more courses out there. If you need more information, feel free to email me at marketerscout.com, or you can always contact me on LinkedIn. We have some course Q&A out there. Feel free to go out and check your knowledge based on